Hello friends, welcome back to Woodbeard. My name is Christian, aka Woodbeard. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. It's not project based. As you can see, I've got myself a little injury. No, it is not woodworking related. It's just a sprained thumb. It's not weird. Everyone gets them. There's no need to elaborate on how it happened. I thought since I'm injured, it's a fitting time to do story time with Woodbeard. Today's story time is about my 3 most significant injuries. I personally find it helpful to watch other woodworkers talk about their injuries, not because I'm into the blood and guts and gore of it all, not at all, not even close, but it helps me identify blind spots in my own practice that can help me be safer. And so my hope is that this might help you as well. If you only watch my videos to see what projects I'm working on and the thought of hearing about 3 of my significant injuries doesn't appeal to you, by all means, I take no offense. I'll catch you on the next one. Likewise, if you're someone who doesn't like descriptions and maybe the odd image or 2 here, I promise the images are pretty tame and I'll give plenty of notice before I show anything on stream. But if that's not your thing, again, I take no offense. I'll see you on the next one. I hope you have a lovely day. Okay, for those of you that are left, thank you for sticking around. Here are my 3 most significant injuries to date. This first one I consider my first actual woodworking injury. It was not as serious as the other 2, but it was a little bit more than just a sliver or a nick from a carving knife. So pretty early on in my woodworking discipline, I attempted what is known as the ball in cage. And it's where you take a solid piece of wood and you carve out a cage that has a ball in it that's free rolling. Here's some images of what it's supposed to look like. And here's what I did. You can see the ball is free-flowing, but it's not really a ball, and it's actually quite broken in parts. It's terrible. I just dove in without a plan for this whatsoever, and yeah, that's what I ended up with. So not satisfied with that, I decided I'm gonna try it again, but I'm gonna plan it out this time. Watched a bunch of YouTube tutorials, studied some plans, and went back at it again. So the injury happened on the second one I attempted. I was using what is called a skewed chisel. So for those that don't know, a regular chisel looks like this. It's square, it's got a flat head on it, and that's it. A skewed chisel, however, comes to a sharper point. I don't know what I did with mine, I haven't used it in years, but this is what they look like. This was really handy at curving the ball and getting into tight spaces that I couldn't get with a regular chisel. And this is where it all went wrong. I'd been working on this for a couple hours that day, so I was getting tired and my mind was drifting, and I did that thing where you just want to speed up a little to get it done already. And throwing caution to the wind, I picked up the ball and cage in my left hand and started chiseling down, trying to free the ball with my right hand. And that's when it happened. The chisel didn't sink completely down into the wood. Instead, it slipped past it and right into my palm. I instantly dropped the ball and cage and chisel. Thankfully, it missed my foot, and I ran for the sink. I knew the chisel had gone pretty deep into my palm, but it didn't go too wide because of the skewed nature of the chisel. Thankfully, it didn't bleed for very long, but the pain did stick around for a few days, and it made it a little difficult to work on things. However, I was still an eager little woodworker, and so I just wrapped it up with some gauze, and I just kept working. Which in hindsight may not have been the best thing, because it kept tearing a little bit and reopening, so it took longer to heal than it should have, simply because I didn't want to just give it time to rest and heal up. So I now have this tiny scar on the palm of my hand that reminds me every day to just slow down. And that second ball and cage turned out way better. Look at that. All right, that's it for injury number 1. On to the next one. Okay, we're stepping things up here for number 2, and there will be some images, full disclosure, coming up of the wound. Not fresh, but bandaged up and in the healing process. So, not too long after the Palm Chisel incident, I was working on a project for a friend. I cannot for the life of me remember what that project was right now, but I do know it involved padauk wood. Some people say padouk, some say padauk. I say padauk, but however you choose to say it, cool. Do I have any padauk? Ooh, I have some upstairs. Yeah, be right back. This is like those scenes in movies where people drive away, but you can still hear them in their car even though they're miles away. Can you guys still hear me? Oh, here we are. All right, so this is padauk. This is a pour over box that I made years ago, unrelated to this injury, but it's got this really nice reddish brown color. It's beautiful wood. I had never worked with it before and didn't do my homework on what it was like to work with, so that was my first mistake. My second mistake was thinking I could use my cheap handsaw that came with my miter box to resaw a piece of padauk. Resawing is a technique where you cut the board lengthwise with the grain to reduce its thickness. I had never done this before, and I was attempting to do it for the first time with this on a piece of padauk. What could go wrong? Turns out a lot. Because the saw I was using, which is this exact one, which may still have some remnants of the injury on it, is not built for resawing padauk. It took all my time and effort to get through this. It took a lot of effort just to make a dent in the wood, but for some reason I was determined to get through it. So I kept sawing and sawing and sawing until my arm was ready to totally give out. At this moment, I had made it about 3/4 of the way through the cut, and it looked pretty straight and usable, but I had a very important decision to make. Do I keep going? It's probably another 5 minutes, maybe 10 tops, to finish this cut, or do I take a break and come back either later today or tomorrow? I can tell you in hindsight what I should have done, which was take a break, make a sandwich, go watch a movie, come back later, maybe tomorrow. That's not what I did. I chose wrong. I decided I've made it this far. What's another few minutes? I bet you can guess what happened next. I put all my effort into those last few cuts, and I was feeling pretty good about myself. And I knew I was coming down to 1 or 2 pulls left. And so I just put all my effort into it. And on the very last stroke, the piece of padauk broke off. And the saw traveled straight down to the table where my hand had been. Instantly, I knew I had done something pretty bad. That could have been due to the pain that I instantly felt in my finger, or the blood that splattered out. I grabbed my finger with my other hand, and I ran for the bathroom. And in those 10 to 15 steps it took to get there, my right hand was filled with blood already. So it's a little freaky. I let go of my finger to turn the tap on, and just blood was pouring out of my finger. So I rinsed it out as best I could and tried to assess the damage. I don't know how it only hit my index finger because my hand was down on the table. The only thing I can think of is maybe that knuckle was sticking up and that took all of the force of the saw. I really don't recall. But the cut I made was pretty gruesome at the time. I could see a little bit of white in there, which I'm assuming was my knuckle bone or something. I'm not too sure, but it was nasty. So I got it rinsed out as best I could and wrapped it in wet toilet paper and held it above my head. I then ran to get my cell phone so I could text my wife. She was out running errands, and I thought, there's a good chance I'm going to need some help here. She flew back to the apartment in record time. I think she was about 5 or 6 blocks away at the time, and she made it back in like 2 or 3 minutes. She sprinted the whole way. When she walked in, it was quite the sight. She saw me with this hand up over my head, pulling up a new pair of shorts. and she asked what was going on. I think she assumed I got blood on the other shorts and that's why I was changing, but that wasn't it. I told her, yeah, you don't like the shorts I was wearing and I didn't think you'd want to be seen in public with me wearing those. I think I was going into shock a little bit because it didn't register in my head that she's not going to care what I'm wearing. She's just going to care that we get this taken care of as quick as possible. So we walked down to the hospital, or rather speed walked down to the hospital, which was only about 3 or 4 blocks away from where we lived at the time. And I just kept my finger held up to my chest the whole time. Thankfully, we got to the emergency room pretty quickly and only had to wait a couple hours before we saw a doctor. He took a look at it, he cleaned it out, but he didn't think it was quite bad enough for stitches. So he put some, like, what looked like crazy glue on it to close up the wound and some stitch tape, and then bandaged it up and sent me on my way. And thankfully, because I live in Canada and we have universal healthcare, it cost me nothing. We returned home and found some blood spatter in some very interesting places. There was the obvious on the workbench, on the piece of pedalk I was working on. There was a nice trail of it leading to the bathroom. But the funniest spot we found was on the door jamb inside the bathroom. We think that's from when I was texting my wife while holding my hand up over my head. I must have rested it on the door jamb. So that was fun. I kept it wrapped for a few days, as the doctor suggested, and then a couple days later, the stitch tape naturally fell off, and I just had to keep it clean and be careful for a couple weeks while it healed. But really, I'm incredibly fortunate because this could have been a lot worse than it was. I have a scar across my knuckle, and there is a bit of reduced movement. For a long time, I could only bend it like halfway. It's getting better now, but it's still not as good as it used to be, which you can see on my right. Thankfully, it doesn't hinder my work. I don't really notice it that much, so could have been much worse. So that's injury number 2, which means we've only got one left. And for me personally, this is the worst one by far. I can promise you this one has no blood at all, no torn flesh, but it's something much worse in my mind. It involves my eyeball. A number of years ago, my brother-in-law and his lovely fiance were getting married down in Florida. Brian and I were gonna go, and I thought I should make a gift for them. What I came up with was this little ring box that they could put their rings in for the ceremony, or a ring box to keep some jewelry in later. I designed this cute little box with maple, walnut, and again, pedalk. Is it the pedalk or is it me? I think it's me. Everything about this build went super smooth and I was so happy with it. I was doing new techniques that I hadn't tried before and it was working out. I had assembled the box a couple weeks before we needed to leave. It was great. It was all going really smooth. Maybe a little too smooth. I was sitting on the back deck doing the final sanding and just thinking about what a great project this was, how smooth it went, and hoping that they would really like it. And that's when I made my big mistake. I was sanding the inside of the box and instinctively leaned in to blow the sawdust out. Now, I am not the smartest person in the world, but even I should have known that if you have a box that has a bunch of sawdust in it and you blow into said box, that sawdust has no place to go but back in your face. And yet, that's exactly what I did. I got an entire face full of microscopic sawdust and wood chips all over my face, in my beard, and worst of all, in my eyes. Yeah, I wasn't smart enough to close my eyes while I blew into a box filled with sawdust. My eyes felt so terrible and I instinctively started rubbing them to try to get all the sawdust out, which, as it turned out, was the worst possible thing I could do. I went into the bathroom sink and flushed out my eyes as best I could, and after a minute of doing that, I actually felt okay. And I thought, whew, all right, we're in the clear. No. It was maybe 15, 20 minutes later. Just noticed my left eye felt really sensitive all of a sudden. It started to burn. It really felt like, you know, when you get poked in the eye and you get that burny feeling? That's what came on pretty quickly. And so I knew that I had done something pretty bad. I tried putting a cold compress on my eye, thinking maybe that will magically fix it. Spoiler alert, it did not. So after about 30 minutes of that, I went back to the bathroom to see if I could see anything in my eye. When I leaned in to look in the mirror, I saw it. Right near the center of my eye, there was a tiny little sliver of wood. My heart and my guts and everything sank. I freaked out. Now, there's one thing you need to know about me, which tells you why this is the worst injury I've ever had in my mind. I don't like anything near my eyes. I don't like even thinking about things going near my eyes. If I think about people putting contact lenses in, my eyes start watering. I'm thinking about it now and it's freaking me out. So the fact that I had a microscopic little piece of wood visible on my eyeball that I could not get out is the worst. I flushed my eye out multiple times again. Still, it was there. I had no choice but to do the unthinkable and try to touch my eyeball. I tried my finger, but I couldn't get close. I wet a Q-tip and tried to see if maybe that would help. It didn't. I did manage to make contact a couple times, but the wood was still there. I tried paper towel, again, same thing. Now, my wife Brian knew this was really serious when I did the unthinkable. I asked her to try to help me by touching my eyeball. Still don't like it to this day. To her credit, she was very gentle. I laid down on the floor and she attempted multiple times to clear the piece of wood from my eye, but she couldn't do it either. So that meant another trip to urgent care. We called an Uber because I couldn't drive with one eye, and the entire trip there, I was trying to think of ways I could get out of it. Like, maybe there was something I didn't try. Maybe I'll just sleep on it and, you know, my body will naturally flush it out, but nah, there was no getting out of it. So we got to urgent care and we had to wait a couple hours, a couple agonizing hours while I envisioned all the worst possible things that were about to happen. We finally got into a room to see a doctor, and he did the thing that I dreaded. He touched my eyeball. Straight out the gate. He was a very good doctor. He was very quick, which I greatly appreciated. So the first thing he did was squirt a cleanser into my eye. That did not feel good. It made my eye very warm, but it seemed to flush the piece of wood out, which was the goal. However, he wasn't done. The second thing he put in my eye, I believe, was iodine or some yellow solution that made my eye sting for a second and made me cry yellow, as you can see in this photo. But then he brought a black light over and had my wife take a look, and it highlighted in the center of my eye a very visible cut. It turned out that when I rubbed my eyes, I had scraped this little sliver of wood across my eyeball, leaving a cut, a very noticeable under the black light cut. Yeah, I cut my eyeball. He told me the eyeball will heal on its own in a relatively short period, maybe a week or two. I asked, can I get an eye patch? Thinking some good could come out of this experience. But he just said he thought it would hinder the healing process, so I didn't even get that. It did heal on its own in about a week or so. Thankfully, it wasn't that much of an issue in Florida. I did find the sun was a little sensitive, but overall, it didn't harm our trip, and we had a really great time. So those are my 3 most significant injuries, and I hope it stays that way for a very long time. I didn't tell you any of these to try to gross you out at all, but more in the hopes that my mistakes can help you learn a few things. Number 1, when your brain and or body are telling you, we are tired, we need a break, please listen to them. It's really not worth trying to plow through and finish something quick when you're just adding on several hours of hospital visits and rehab time. Number 2, think about the cuts you're attempting and the movements to do so before you do them. Taking an extra minute or 2 to practice a cut and examine any possible issues is well worth it. Trust me, your body will thank you. And number 3, wear your PPE. I'm talking glasses, earmuffs, masks. I'm talking glasses to keep dust and wood chips from flying in your eyeballs. Earmuffs to protect your hearing and keep things from actually going in there. Trust me, you're gonna wanna be able to hear things later in life. And masks. I use this RZ mask to keep debris out of my mouth, out of my nose, out of my lungs, because I like breathing. And you should too. I know there's many more lessons to learn. You will definitely get slivers as a woodworker. You will definitely get cuts and see some blood. But I hope for you it's just a flesh wound and nothing more. So I know this wasn't the most pleasant story time ever. Let me know what you think about this story time format in the comments. Do like, subscribe, all that stuff that people say. Really appreciate you watching this video. I promise next one will be much happier. Probably a project based. I haven't finished it yet, but I won't be talking about injuries. So thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate every single one of you. And I will see you on the next one. I hope you have a lovely day.